excited for you guys to really hear her story. She's coming here to Scale to Exit, guys, to really tell you all the steps that she did in order to transform from a bankrupt to an eight-figure exit. She's going to tell you how the best part about her exit was the actual terms that she got. That way you guys can know that there is the different kinds of terms that you can get when you have an exit. She's coming here to talk about the story behind why she was going bankrupt. Um, yeah, so there's going to be a lot to unpack on this episode, and I'm really hoping that you're tuning in for the whole thing. So remember, we are streaming everywhere. So my favorite platform is YouTube because you get to see us in our core, in our essence, talking to you guys to the camera, but as well, if you're driving, please tune in from Apple or Spotify, and whenever you get a chance, please go ahead and share. This episode comes packed with a lot of information for you guys, business owners. So, yeah, please go ahead and share the love. There's a lot that comes in creating an episode. There's a team behind it. There's a process behind it. We basically handpicked our guests. We craft each episode ahead of time. There is a process, so to bring you the best experience ever. Okay, so without further ado, let me go ahead and tell you who our special guest is. All right, so joining us today is Joyce Marter, licensed psychotherapist, entrepreneur, and award-winning author. Joyce founded and scaled the national mental health company and made a successful eight-figure exit. She is the author of The Financial Mindset Fix, which provides the tools to grow your emotional and financial health in tandem. Joyce is here to share her story, what she learned along the way, and how a shift in mindset can lead to sustainable success. I want you guys to know, and I'm going to remind you here that I will be putting a link to her resources. She has a lot of free resources for you guys to utilize to your advantage. She's going to talk about it at the end of the show. So, without further ado, guys, are you guys excited? Are you guys excited? So excited. I wish you could be here telling me how excited you are. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring her in. And as always, I will see you on the other side. So, thank you so much for coming, Joyce, to Scale to Exit. I am so excited to have you here. I just love your background. You are a founder that exited your business for high business valuation. You are also a psychotherapist, which you dive into financial mindset and how to be successful in entrepreneurship. So I'm very excited. So, but first, I want to know what drove you to pick this career in your life.
Well, I really had a desire to be of service to others. And like many psychotherapists, I think we come into the field because of our own family of origin issues, that something that we've been through in our earlier life experiences have gifted us with empathy and insight and communication skills and a desire to be of help and service to others. And so then the second thing that we learned is that we often come into the field because of our own issues. So I was afraid that my professors were going to see that I have an anxiety disorder, but thankfully they recommended we all seek our personal therapy, and it was transformational for me. And I'm really passionate about removing the shame and stigma around mental health and promoting access to care, which is why I founded my company.
So how old were you when you said, I want to become a psychotherapist?
I was in college at Ohio State. I was probably 19 or 20.
Okay.
And I had the foresight of knowing that I really wanted work-life balance. And I thought that being in private practice, I would be able to select my own hours and hopefully someday become a mom and be able to balance that with my profession, which was very important to me.
So it led you to funding your business, right? Do you want to talk about that? Because you had a great story on it.
Thank you so much. So early on in my practice, I worked for community mental health and substance use agencies, and it's very low paying, high burnout work. And I wanted the flexibility of private practice. So I came into private practice and became insurance friendly because I believe that we all need mental health, like we go to the dentist or the doctor, and it should be affordable and accessible.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I realized that in the Chicago area, many therapists only accepted full fee self pay, or they worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield, leaving a lot of people not able to
Yeah.
find therapists that are in
Mhm.
network. And
Mhm.
so I started Urban Balance, which was a group counseling practice with $500 to invest in the business. I had 50,000 of student loans. And unfortunately, I made 1,000 mistakes and I ended up in cash flow hell. And this experience really broke me open. I lost a business partner. I thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy.
Mhm.
And I ended up seeking the help of a CPA for a business valuation.
Mhm.
And it was then that I learned that my business had value. And I began to work to grow and scale it and prepare for exit.
So, okay, let's dive into that one more because there's so much to unpack. What type of mistakes did you do, if you want to share, that maybe the audience that's listening here should be aware of making in order to prevent cash flow negative and also the business valuation? How did you came across? Not a lot of people know about like the business valuation of things. So, where was the moment that you sparked you that interest of like, oh, I need to get a business valuation?
Well, I think that to start off with, I started the company with a friend,
Yeah.
and she and I both understood having a solo practice, but we made some mistakes. Like, for example, we hired a corporate attorney to set up our business structure, our
Mm-hmm.
entity, and
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize that we probably needed a healthcare attorney because we weren't properly registered with the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And we
Wow.
then had to dismantle that organization and restructure in some ways. I think we were trying to save money, honestly. We didn't
Yeah.
have a lot to invest,
Mm-hmm.
and we did not seek business or financial consultation in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that we had a rough business plan
Yeah.
and we just kept hiring new therapists whenever we had an overflow of referrals. And we grew really quickly because of demand. And because there's a delay in getting paid by insurance, that was manageable when we were a much smaller practice. And it was, $10,000 that was outstanding from insurance. It was not manageable when it was hundreds of thousands of dollars
Okay.
outstanding in insurance. We had built multiple locations and we're growing really before we had an infrastructure.
Uh-huh.
And am business minded, but I'm not business trained. And in retrospect, I should have hired a CPA to do
Mm-hmm.
cash flow projections, to look at our
Mm-hmm.
business model, to make sure that our spending was to scale.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing that he saw when he did the business valuation was that the model truly did work, but
Mm-hmm.
that we needed proper lending to bridge the gap between
Mm-hmm.
the sessions and
Mm-hmm.
payroll and
Mm-hmm.
rent.
Yeah.
And you're right. I had no idea what a business valuation was. So what happened was we were in cash flow hell, and
Mm-hmm.
my former business partner had it up to here, and she sent an email to me and actually our entire staff and said, I'm out. I can't deal with this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was devastating to me because we were close friends and it felt like such a abandonment and betrayal. And it
Mm-hmm.
also was very confusing for the staff. They felt like the business was a sinking ship.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, she and I had the foresight to have a dissolution agreement for our
Mm-hmm.
business partnership that we set up at the time that we set up our entity. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like having a prenup. And so we had an agreement about how we would separate in the event that something came up. And that was enormously helpful. I agreed for her to retain one location that was nearest to her home. And I took responsibility for the very expensive leases and the hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that we had for the other locations, really
Mm-hmm.
trusting that we had built something,
Mm-hmm.
but really not knowing exactly what the value was. And this experience broke me open. Instead of telling the world,
Yeah.
everything's okay, I got this,
Yeah.
I had a piece of humble pie. I had to practice humility. And I
Yeah.
started telling everyone that I had made a huge mistake. I did not seek proper business and financial consultation soon enough. We were
Mm-hmm.
in a huge cash flow pickle and I needed help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of my neighbors is a MBA, moved since then, but he said, Joyce, you need a business valuation. And I said, what's that? And he was like, my CPA can help you. And I brought my QuickBooks file, handed it over in tears. And I could see he felt really badly for me. And he said, okay, I'm going to look at the numbers and I'll call you in a couple days. And he called me a couple days later and he said, Joyce, your business is worth a 7-figure multiple. I was shocked. I said, how is that possible? I have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and no cash.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, really, the model works. You just have a cash flow problem and I can help you
Mm-hmm.
get proper lending. And he helped coach me on how to bring some of the business to scale. For
Yeah.
example, I was paying management too much and that was really impairing the profit margin.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and recap because I want to make sure everybody like grasp on everything that you say because it was amazing. Mistakes that you've done and that a lot of people do. Not seeking proper counsel, business or finance. Not getting the right lawyer, obviously because budget constraints, but there's a lot of lawyers now that offer a lot of flexibility. So that's good. Not having financial controls like cash flow management and not really putting the systems in place, which is a huge one for as you scale. So you were scaling and there was cash flow management and there was processes in place that needed to come in to set up the infrastructure to help you scale lean and nice and everything. And then one point that you touch is the bridging the gap between getting the funding and getting the payment because that's a big one that a lot of people don't really know that exists as well. There's non-traditional companies out there that they will bridge the gap when you need some funding. However, it may be a little bit more of interest, or it may be on using your credit score as collateral. But there's something out there to make you stay afloat. So when it comes to our scaling, I really want to know because you scale really fast. What besides the infrastructure, what other strategies do you think that you wanted to put, like you should have put in place now that you look back at that experience?
Well, we honestly were flying by the seat of our pants. And we had a booming headquarters in Chicago, and we added other locations really based on our relationships. So if we had a star therapist that said, I would love to have an Urban Balance location in my suburb, we were like, sure. And so we had new sprouting satellite locations without much of a strategy behind it. Uh, I think some of that worked well in terms of we had really trusted leaders that helped us grow new locations. We
Yeah.
made some mistakes. For example, we learned that businesses do better in areas surrounded by other businesses and not in residential areas. So we had to move one location, even just a few miles down the street, and it improved dramatically. We also made some silly mistakes based on ego. For example, as we grew, my business partner and I decided that we were going to get a new suite in our headquarter building just for us. And it had these ridiculously large offices and an executive assistant, all of which we couldn't afford. And so that was really embarrassing when a year later we realized it wasn't working. We had to move back to our original location and unfortunately let go of that assistant. So, definitely we bit off more than we could chew at
Yeah.
times. And it was kind of by trial and error.
Yeah.
But luckily, I think because there's such a need for good mental health
Mm-hmm.
services and we were in network, it was such a win for the clients. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think we provided a lot of work-life balance for the staff. So we had enough, enough therapists and clients.
Yeah.
It's just the money management, the business management that wasn't great.
That wasn't great. So once you started working with a CPA, right? And he started looking at your business valuation, and you started, I guess you contracted a little bit as well, right? Because your partner was gone, and then you got rid of some locations. You had to get rid of an assistant. So you did a little bit of a period of contraction, and then you expanded. What happened after the CPA came in?
Well, first of all, he noticed that it was enormously expensive for us to have managers at every location,
Okay.
and that I was kind of losing my shirts on those roles.
Uh-huh.
And basically, they were therapists that were seeing 25 or more clients a week, but they were also responsible for that location in terms of making sure the waiting room looked nice and interviewing staff and that type of thing. And so, unfortunately, we had to restructure those roles, moving them into more of a clinical supervisor role, and then giving them a stipend for being an office coordinator. And
Mm-hmm.
that helped the company be more sustainable. That was one big change that we made. And so then our leadership became centralized.
Okay.
So our intake department, our billing, our accounting,
Mm-hmm.
all those different parts of the business leadership were centralized for all locations.
Okay.
And when I went to sell, that was one thing that they really liked, is that we were very lean.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have receptionists sitting in each location because they weren't needed, honestly.
Yeah.
Clients could let themselves in, therapists could bring them back
Yeah.
to their offices.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to save a lot of money there and, grow exponentially. We also worked with insurance companies to have better rates because as we
Okay.
were growing, we were of value to them. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
negotiated those deals. I also had, this was a really fortunate thing. I was in Chicago, and Kellogg, the School of Business, reached out to me and asked if I would welcome 3 interns for a quarter to do a complete evaluation of the business. They did everything from reviewing us online, seeing what was out there, reviews, etc., interviewing staff, looking at our policies and procedures, and looking at our QuickBooks files and tax returns. And they came back with some interesting observations. For example, they noticed we were only utilizing 45% of our office time.
Okay.
And so what we did with that is we became a little bit more focused on our therapist productivity and making sure that they were
Yeah.
booking the time that they had available in their offices. And
Mm-hmm.
we also extended our hours to Sundays, which we didn't think clients would come, but they did come. And, couples or adolescents or people who have busy jobs. And that expanded the business.
I love all of that. So basically, centralize your location. You don't need, if you have multiple locations, you don't need the same staff for each one. Like you just need to have it like a one headquarters, like one main one that has handles all of the admin and finances and all of the good stuff, which is really valuable. And then having utilization to the max, that's actually really good practice, especially when it comes to service, when we're dealing with a lot of labor and service people, businesses, because it's true, most of the time we need to calculate that utilization rate per person, because most of the times that's where the money pit goes. It's a huge money pit.
Yes.
And how long did it take you, all this journey from like that moment where you had to let go of your partner and you were about to shut everything down to the moment of your exit?
That was 2011 when my partner left, and I thought I was filing bankruptcy, and I successfully sold in 2017. So
Wow.
it was only 6 years. And I knew, well, at the time of the business valuation, the CPA asked me, he said, Joyce, what is your exit plan? And I
Yes.
said, what's an exit plan? And he said, when you build a business, you have to think about the end game.
Yeah.
And what do you want? And at this point, I was so burnt out and exhausted from seeing 25 clients a week, plus running this business and having my business partner leave, that I was like, I only have 5 years left in me. I can do this for 5 more years. and then I have to give this baby away. I
Yeah.
felt like my business was my baby, but it was hard. And so with that, my leadership team and the CPA and I worked really hard for the next 5 years to improve the business on every level. And then, true to my word, 5 years later, I hired a business broker and he put the business on the market. I started having side conversations with people who I thought might be interested. And we had 50 prospective buyers and 8 offers. And it took a year and a half to sell, which is because I wasn't in a rush and I wanted to pick the best buyer.
Yeah. So, exit plan. I love that. And this is why we call scale to exit. You did everything that is scaling to exit needs to happen, which is setting up the business with the right strategies, scaling lean, put everything centralized, increase your profit margins, improve revenue per head, and then go for an exit and really like find a good buyer for your business and really set up the deal and the structure that you want to leave with, because most of the times people don't get that opportunity. Can you, if you want to share like your business valuation at the beginning and then what you sold it for and who was the buyer for your business?
So in 2011, when we had the business valuation, he said, your business is worth around $2 million. And then after we worked on it for a number of years, he said that it was more around 3 to 4.
Okay.
And I don't think we could have gotten 2 million at that point. And I was able to sell it for 4 million. But it was a strategic sale where the buyer that I chose, I was able to roll over a quarter of that, so $1 million into the parent company. And
Okay.
that parent company sold twice. And the first time it sold, I got more than double what I got in the first business buy.
Yeah.
And then I got an additional payout after that. So having a strategic buyer that's going to grow the business where you still have some skin in the game, because I was in my early 40s, I wasn't 70,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to still have, I believe in mental health and I believe in, the business growing. And so that was a huge blessing. What I thought very, very seriously about is about the deal, because I
Yeah.
understood from my broker that they come in different packages. There's the price, there's my role on the other side of the deal. Oftentimes there's a note that's contingent on performance. So sometimes what you get upfront differs.
Yeah.
There's an escrow that they hold in case there are any legal problems or issues that come up. And, also what's going to happen to your brand, what's going to happen to your people. And so as I looked at the prospective buyers, I was really clear that I wanted to be free. I did not want to stay on as CEO. I wanted to be free to become a public speaker and author and do my own thing. And one of the best deals, they offered me, 4 million plus a really lucrative salary to stay on as CEO. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And I also didn't trust them. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to sell to really check in with your heart and your gut and pay attention to your intuition. I felt like there was some misogyny there, honestly. And as a female business owner with mostly female employees and many female clients, that was not something that I was going to agree to.
Wow. I love that. So you touched on something really important. A lot of people, only 20% of the population really get a voluntary exit. And 90 or 80 or 90% of those that do, they're not happy with their exit. So the fact that you said I was able to really, somebody came in, explained to me that I have options on my deal and how important that's going to affect me as I move on from this business. it's huge because people don't get that. And you were able to choose accordingly to not only yourself, but also to your team, to your culture, to your brand, to
Yeah,
your clients, which is so important. And I feel like there's a lot that comes with that. In that process, and I really the reason why I'm saying this is because I really want people to be aware that there is a huge transition happening after the business is gone, and that transition can really affect your mental and emotional health. um do you want to talk about that part?
absolutely. I would advise people to really think about selling your business as a part-time job. And
Mm-hmm.
so you need to create some bandwidth. So I decreased the number of clients I was seeing dramatically at that time
Mm.
so that I had time for all of these meetings and conversations because this was my greatest asset and
Yeah.
most important financial decision. And again, I really got clear on what minimum amount of price I was willing to accept, what my boundaries were around my role
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
around, who I was going to let take control of the
Yeah.
company. And so who I chose were people with deep knowledge and expertise in behavioral
Mm-hmm.
health care. So I trusted that they know the business, that they were going to be able to help it grow. They let me stay on as a consultant, a paid consultant part time. And that felt great. It was a nice little transition
Yeah.
while I was building my new business. And they, didn't offer me all the money up front, but they offered a good amount up front, plus the note, plus the escrow. And I
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting all of that amount. So it worked out exactly as one would hope. And then, like I mentioned, because I invested in the parent company, that ended up being even more valuable than the sale of my business, that opportunity. So I'm enormously grateful. A lot of times people ask, like, oh my gosh, you sold your baby. Like, how's your identity? And I felt a lot of relief, a lot of
Yeah.
pride that I created something that helped a lot of people
Yeah.
and handed it over to people who would hopefully help more people.
Yeah.
And I knew that I just couldn't stay in that role without being really overwhelmed and
Mm-hmm.
unhappy professionally. And I need to practice what I preach and do the work that I love.
So for everybody that's listening out there, get clear on what your price is and get clear on what the outcome is going to be after you transition out. That's two of the biggest things. Because like you said, consulting was great. I rather do that. It was not about the money anymore. It was more about like, where do I want to put my energy after that? What do I want to accomplish after that? So everybody that's exiting their business should probably have a plan in place of what I want to do after. That way they're not coming out and they're like, oh my goodness, what do I do now at 8 to 5 or 12 hours that we work, right? As business owners. And then you created this amazing book, which is called The Financial Mindset Fix, where you discuss 12 money mindsets. And I really want to dive into those 12 money mindsets with you.
Well, I always joke that we therapists specialize in our own issues. So obviously, I dealt with a lot of financial anxiety with
Mm-hmm.
mental health implications like insomnia and panic attacks. And so when I was going through that cash flow hell, I used tools from mindfulness, from cognitive behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, and other strategies from my clinical training to help me cope and turn the ship around. And so I realized through 25 years of counseling diverse clients that there are 12 mindsets that lead to holistic success. And these include presence, an abundance mindset, compassion, resilience, healthy detachment or emotional separation, and self love, support, and more. And it turns out I used a PhD researcher to help write my book. And all of those mindsets are empirically proven to improve both mental well being and financial mindset, financial health. And so the book is a program with exercises. So I share at the beginning of each chapter a little blurb about my story and what I learned from a place of humility. in hopes to help others feel normal, like other people have been there. And then I teach the skills in psychology. And then there are journaling prompts, there are CBT exercises, there are these self assessment wheels so that you can work on these 12 mindsets that are going to help you operate at your best capacity in your business and personally and relationally.
So one of the biggest things that I've seen with my clients and people that I talk to is their mindset. I can be in front of a great business model and you're killing it, you're doing amazing. Oh my God. And then I can see that business owner gets in their own way. And
Yes.
I am like, oh my God, I can only pep talk you and motivate you and do all these things, but it really comes from within. And I really don't know at what point, like, I don't know what to say, because it really comes from within. And I see the struggle and it makes me really sad. Like, and it's the most powerful thing. Mindset is the one that drives your success. I'm guaranteed, I know that for a fact. So, what are some things that people can do to gear from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset?
Yes, that's so important, especially now during times of economic uncertainty. It's
Yeah.
it's our human nature to focus on fear and worry and lack, and that the referrals are going down, the income is going down. And so we need to get a handle on that. And so really paying attention to your self-talk, because our thoughts precede our emotions and behaviors. So
Mm-hmm.
if we have fear-based and catastrophic thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up homeless, I'm going to have to close my business, that does nothing but scare our nervous system and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelm us and fuel depression and anxiety. So we need to learn how to practice mindfulness, to get grounded in the present moment, facilitate equanimity or mental calmness and clarity, so
Mm-hmm.
that we're not ruminating about the past or we're not worrying about the future, but
Mm-hmm.
we're grounded in the moment and we can be thoughtfully responsive rather than emotionally reactive.
Okay.
And my father grew up during the Great Depression, so he had scarcity mindset. And so for a lot of us, if we've had financial traumas, like my dad growing up in the Great Depression was a trauma, he was unemployed during
Mm-hmm.
much of the automotive recession of the 1980s, which was traumatic for also me and our family because he became very depressed. So when we have financial traumas, that makes us more likely to have scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset also causes us to set ceilings. We end up, not seeing possibilities. We see closed doors. That's not possible. In some ways, I have a combination of scarcity mindset and the opposite, which one of my girlfriends, who's a psychotherapist as well, calls psychotic optimism. And that's where I believe in it. I'm so passionate. I have faith that this is my purpose, my passion, my life's work, and I'm going to go for it with tenacity. And so I think that has countered some of the scarcity mindset. I remember we opened our first little office and it was so tiny. And my business partner and I called it our global headquarters. So we were laying the stage for this to grow into something very abundant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our language, it's our thoughts. And we have to access support, because I think when we suffer in fear and shame, maybe on our own, it breeds. But if we talk about it with other business owners and business leaders, it's so normalizing, because we all go through these ebbs and challenges at different times in our businesses. And the difference between those who succeed and those who don't is that they don't give up.
Agreed. So I feel like everybody comes from they have some kind of pain or a wound or a fear, like you said, that really blocks your mind from seeing abundance everywhere. And it really comes with healing, right? Like you have to heal yourself internally, going to therapy and doing all that good stuff in order to change the lens of your life. but also like what you said, self-talk, like more positive self-talk. Sometimes I talk to myself negatively and I'm like, no, 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 we're not doing that today. That's not happening. Okay. So you have to like make sure you're aware. And then what you said as well, like finding the support. And I think I'm very optimist as well, like too optimist. Like I go, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I hit the wall. Well, we'll find a hole in the wall to go through the hole, but I'm very optimist like that nature. But I do feel like sometimes could be too optimistic. And some people say, okay, you're flying, you know, you're come back to earth. So basically be grounded is really important. And there's tools for that, right? Like meditation, or how big is mindfulness when it comes to making decisions in the financial world when you're in your business?
The research around mindfulness is so profound. And when I was in that falling apart, getting broken open moment, I started a daily meditation practice. And that led me into yoga, which is mindfulness with movement.
Yeah.
And I really credit those practices for getting me through times of challenge. And so when we breathe and we connect to the breath, we can
Mm-hmm.
connect to our deeper, higher selves. We can detach from our egos, which drive, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and our inner critic. And all of that is enormously helpful in helping us get out of our own way. I also see in my clinical practice and in my business coaching and in my own journey that there's a huge connection between self-worth and net worth. So when I had my business valuation, my CPA confronted me and he said, Joyce, you're not running a charity to employ therapists. You deserve to make a profit. And he realized that I was such a caregiver, and some of that was rooted in people pleasing and low
Yeah.
self-esteem, that I was taking care of everyone else before myself. And I was exhausted, depleted, burnt out, and broke.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to make corrective change. And yes, that involved therapy, it involved coaching, it involved consulting and accessing support, because all of us is smarter than any one of us. And to have systems of checks and balances with your accountant, your financial planner, and other advisors is going to help you succeed.
So self-worth equals net worth. I've heard that one before as well. And self-worth is a combination of self-love. And self-worth, like you said, like we love ourselves, but I also want to please people and I want to, care for others. So what are some things that people can do to elevate their self-worth? Would it be to set boundaries, healthy boundaries with other people, like family or friends?
Absolutely. So I'm going to back up a little bit on this. On the landing page that you're going to share in the comments, I
Yeah.
have some free tools from my book. There's a self-love wheel, and there's a support wheel, and an abundance wheel, and a financial wheel. And all of those are going to help listeners, embrace their worth. So our self-esteem, it shows up in how we take care of ourselves. So how we, take care of ourselves physically, mentally, lifestyle wise, etc. And for some of us, there needs to be some deep healing because maybe we grew up with abuse or neglect or narcissistic personalities or something that have us feeling small.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there are some gender messages that we may have received. And women in particular, we may have received messages that we're not going to be good at money. We're not good at math, or that our role is to take care of others,
Mm-hmm.
and to take care of ourselves is selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe extraordinarily in the importance of financial literacy and empowerment for women, because in my practice, I see financial infidelity, when there's betrayal financially, secret debt or secret assets, or women who there's not financial transparency. They don't know how much money the partnership has or where it is. And also, mutuality and decision making, etc. And so becoming financially literate and learning how to understand our business reports, our investment options, debt management, everything is going to help us feel more confident. And when we feel more confident, our financial health improves. And you're exactly right. We have financial boundaries with our employees, with our vendors, with the people we rent from, with our clients. And so if we don't feel good about ourselves, we can become financial doormats and not have good financial boundaries, which leads to overwork and burnout and resentment. And on the other hand, if we feel superior to people, if our self-worth is inflated, we could take advantage of others and be entitled and grandiose. And that leads to hardship in business because staff leave, people don't want to refer to you or work with you. So cultivating healthy self-esteem where you embrace your worth, but you have some humility where you know your areas of deficit and needed improvement, is going to help you succeed in being assertive with your boundaries and your communication in a way that shows respect for yourself and for others.
So that's where it all starts, basically. That is basically the foundation of uh, being successful. Because how can people are not going to work with you if you are rude to them, right? Or if you feel, like you said, above them. And you're not going to want to work with people that treat you like a doormat too, right? Because then you're being taken advantage of, and that really hurts your self-worth. So going to your website, people can do this test, and how can they work on their self-worth by themselves? Obviously with support as well of somebody like you, but by themselves as well.
Listen to affirmations. I love Louise Hay and her work. So go on Spotify or wherever you listen to your audiobooks or podcasts. Listen to affirmations. Pay attention to your self-talk. I encourage you to name your inner critic, that voice in your head that puts you down. I've named mine Zelda. She's terrible. And when we become mindful of that part of ourselves, we can realize it's destructive and it's keeping us small, and
Yeah.
we can learn to silence it and instead start to be our own good parent, making sure you're eating right, you're exercising, you're not overworking, and that you're being gentle and kind to yourself, that you're practicing self-forgiveness and self-compassion and treating yourself like you would your best friend or someone who you love very, very much. And also being your biggest advocate. So wanting the best and the most for you, because we often set our own ceilings with self-limiting beliefs.
Yes, that's a huge another one too, the limiting beliefs. So I love what you said, like name your negative Nancy side of you, which is great. You can name her negative Nancy too, and kind of laugh about it with her.
Yeah.
And then also be your own parent and compassionate and take care of yourself in a way, or like you'll be with your best friend that you love. Let's go back to women, because it's so important what you said, that unfortunately we as women get to take care of others. It's in our nature before we take care of ourselves. Like how can women leverage this kind of strength in order to build a prosperous and fulfilled business and life?
Well, I think number one, self-care is not selfish, it's essential. So
Okay.
it's a simple analogy, but we know when we're on an airplane, they say you have to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. And so if we take time for exercise, for sleep, for our own enjoyment, we're going to have more energy. You can't give from an empty cup. So we're
Mm-hmm.
going to have more energy to give others. And sometimes when we set healthy limits with others, for example, our kids or even our partners, it allows them to grow and to feel good about taking responsibility for some areas of their lives. And so and I think having a tribe of other women, I'm part of a group called the Dames, which is
Mm-hmm.
for 6, 7, and 8-figure women business owners. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like therapy and a mastermind, a support group, and a business incubator all in one. And so having communities where we can support one another and give honest feedback is also really important.
So there's those very supportive communities and women out there that they support one another, but there's also women that don't want to support other women. And it sucks, right? Because we do see it both ways. I'm very about supporting everybody, woman, male, everybody. Come to my arena. I'm here for you guys. But I have seen it that some women come to me and they're like, yeah, but it's very like much with an agenda. So have you encountered any kind of these situations, and what have you done if you have encountered them?
Well, I mean, if I'm encountering them as somebody to prospectively hire or collaborate with, then that's a no.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an abundant mindseted person who's about
Mm-hmm.
collaboration and the idea that there's enough resources for all of us and we can share and be generous and support one another.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a person for me to
Mm-hmm.
hire or work with. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a coaching client or a therapy client, for example, I had a coaching client who had a trauma history and of a lot of abuse. And so she had difficulty trusting people and asking for support, and this idea that she has to do everything herself. And through our work together, she ended up working through those traumas significantly and starting to open herself up to ask for support. She's built a huge leadership team. She has a team of consultants and she's delegated a lot that was on her plate. She's working less and her business is more profitable. So it is something that we can change. I know I wasn't comfortable
Yeah.
receiving support because I felt like I was a burden to someone. It felt difficult to trust, but
Mm-hmm.
our business won't grow unless we delegate and trust others and access support. So
Mm-hmm.
if you identify as somebody who doesn't seek support, that's something to be worked through
Yeah.
and something to challenge yourself on because you're robbing yourself of riches.
I love that you said that. So basically, having you only work with people that do have an abundance mindset, like match your energy in that way. Because otherwise, why waste your time? But if you do not have that mindset, or you do like that support, there's things that you can work. It's not definite. Like you can work on yourself and continue being better.
Yeah.
And you talked about leadership before with your business. What kind of values or strategies you put in place in order to grow such a strong leadership team before you exit?
Well, I think I received a lot of leadership training in the professional associations that I was a member of, and I became elected as president of 4 counseling boards.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, I would say that I am good at inspiring people. I'm very mission driven. And so inviting people to be part of that mission really gave a sense of belonging and meaning to the work that they do. I
Uh-huh.
also gave people a lot of freedom and independence in their jobs. So
Mm-hmm.
not being a micromanager.
Mm-hmm.
And as I grew the business, at first, my business partner and I were doing everything from billing to intake, everything. And then as we grew, we thought about what do we least like doing or
Mm-hmm.
what is not worth our time. And so we then outsourced our billing,
Mm-hmm.
hired someone to do intake, and eventually brought in in-house accountant, etc and a clinical director who ended up being instrumental when my business partner left. I ended up promoting her to director of operations. And so that was invaluable. So eventually I grew the business so that there was always a leader between myself and the staff and the clients so
Okay.
that I wasn't interfacing with the day-to-day sort of
Yeah.
needs of the business,
Yeah.
but I was supporting the leadership and dealing with them directly.
Okay, that's a good strategy. Have somebody in between. Yes, because there's people out there. You can always learn from somebody that you hire because you hire them to be better than you and many of the things that you're not good at. So, yeah, I love that approach. When it comes to sales, so I always bring people here and they tell me sales was something that was hard for them to get out of their comfort zone, or How was the sales process for you when you started your business? Did you do a lot of like cold calling and things like that? You had to get out of your introverted self to be able to do it, or how was it?
I was hired previously by a group practice when I was only 24 years old, and they said, you can work here, but you have to get your own clients. And so it was a sink or swim thing. And I started giving little presentations at local schools and local businesses. And it was then that I started realizing that I love public speaking.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty extroverted. I enjoy networking. So going to Chamber of Commerce events or Rotary Club events or community events and talking with other business owners. This is a silly story. I had been practicing my elevator pitch and I went to a department store and had a free makeover at the MAC counter. And the makeup artist asked me what I did. And when I told her I owned a practice on Michigan Avenue, she said, "Oh my gosh, my girlfriend is a psychiatrist who owns a practice on Michigan Avenue." And I asked her, gave her my phone number, and I said, if your friend would be willing to meet me for coffee, I'd love to talk with her, which was new for me to do. I met that friend. She ended up referring hundreds of patients to me over the years, and I referred hundreds to her. It was such a win-win. She invited me to her daughter's birthday that year, and the makeup artist was there as well. So you never know who is going to help support your business. So talk about it all the time and be open to those connections.
I love that you said that. So just be very, and for people that are very introverted though, sometimes people are introverted and they feel scared to talk about their business, or they don't want to go to events, or a lot of it is cold calling too. I actually am very guilty. I don't like to do cold calling. I hire people to do that one for me. What would you say? Yeah, what would you say to those business owners that are introverted in order to, increase their revenue?
Yes, there are businesses that do cold calling. I've worked with Appreciated Asset, which is owned by Jennifer Fry. That was great. But I think digital marketing is so important too. And you
Yeah.
can do that kind of behind the scenes. So
Hmm.
SEO was very critical to my business. I did a lot of PR, so a lot of article writing and interviewing. And all those links from CNN, Wall Street Journal, MTV increased our business's Google rankings, which increased business and also the value of the business. And so there's so much that can be done with SEO, with social media, with advertising online, et cetera, that you don't have to be doing all that work. But maybe you've got a student intern or an employee who would be willing to attend those community events.
Yeah, I love you gave some really good advice out there. PR, I know people have like misconceptions on PR, but being a contributor guest in an article, or writing an article and getting posted on Forbes, right? Or having interviews, that is a slow return, slow burning return, but it's a return that lasts and that builds the value of your business. So for you to say that and express that to the audience is really great. I loved everything that we talked about. Is there anything, Joyce, that I haven't asked you today that we should talk about?
Oh my goodness. I think just to recognize that the entrepreneurial journey has a lot of ups and downs, and not to sell your business at a low point out of panic or reactivity. I could have sold mine for 200,000 back in 2011. That would have been an enormous mistake. So access support, believe in yourself, take care of yourself, and persevere. And there's people like you, Alejandra, and me that can support and help people, grow and scale and have a successful exit.
Yes, I will add you to my network, because when I have those clients, I will just refer them to you. I think it's really important to help people achieve their mindset that they need to be, the financial mindset, the abundance mindset, because that's where it all starts. It starts with yourself. And then once you have yourself together, your business is going to skyrocket. It just opens like, where is the money coming from? I don't know, but it's just coming and raining and pouring, and it's great. But having also like that autonomy and that flexibility and like that really owning your power is so important to me. So I will refer you my clients, and then that way we can work together, because the more exits we can come in, more profitable exits, the more healthy people out there, happier, the more we can change the narrative on what it is business ownership in America. So I'm so happy to have you here, Joyce, and thank you so much for joining me. I will put everything on the show notes, but for everybody that's listening, where can they find you?
My website is joycemarter.com, JoyceMarter.com. I'm on Instagram. I could use some Instagram love, and I have a strong presence on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So for everybody that's listening out there, you can find Joyce on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'll put it in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming to Scale to Exit and giving us so much great advice, from like founding your business, exiting, mistakes, to strategies for mindset, your book, everything. I really appreciate it. And for everybody out there, adios muchachos. Hasta la vista. Bye.